has not been a good day for technology for me. Again, the computer decided to throw a 5-second timer on the songs, so I went back there and I was able to figure that out this time. But we've had a lot of technical issues today, so hopefully this PowerPoint won't mess up on me and everything will be good. It's good to be together and beautiful singing, beautiful song, Light of the World, You Step Down into Darkness. Really, our studies in Judges have really been depicting for us the darkness of a world that denies God, doesn't really pay attention to God, and how they descended into darkness with their desire to do whatever it is that they wanted to do instead of actually listening to the desires of God. So we're going to be continuing our study of Judges. We're going to be looking at Jephthah tonight. So we've been looking at different Bible characters and seeing their story, what they went through in their life, and learning lessons from their story. And so we're going to continue to do that tonight with Jephthah, another judge of Israel. We've been looking at these judges and noticing that their character is not really that great, but that God was able to use these men in order to save his people because God is great. And because God is so merciful and compassionate, and he's shown that to us over and over again throughout the Judges cycle. Today, we're going to be looking at Jephthah, and I want us to start by just thinking about our prayer life that we've been thinking about all throughout this year up until this morning. The sermon series is on prayer. I'd like for us to think about when we pray, we ask God for stuff. That's a normal part of our prayer life. But do we ever manipulate? Do we ever try to convince God to do something for us? I remember multiple times in my life whenever I said to God, if you'll just give me this, then I'll do this. And that kind of mentality and mindset is what we're going to be thinking about tonight as we study Jephthah, because that's exactly what he does. And so we're going to see what that results in as we study this story. Israel has once again strayed from the will of God. They have refused to serve God alone and continually picked up the foreign gods of the land of Canaan that God left there to be a test for Israel. And once again, we see after the Gideon salvation with 300 men killing off 135,000, just wiping out the Midianites that came up against them, we see that Abimelech has wreaked havoc, trying to establish himself as king. And then more cycles come with a judge named Tola that we don't get much information about. And then Jair, which we also don't get much information about. And then the cycle returns again with the judge Jephthah, and we're going to get a lot of information about him. What's different about Jephthah is in the cycle, we've seen Israel going after Baal and Asherah. That seems to be the two gods of the Canaanites and the nations around them that they've continually been pursuing. But in this case, it seems as though they're adding a few gods to the list. If you look in Judges chapter 10, you'll notice, starting in verse 6, it says, the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and served the Baals and the Asheroth, the gods of Syria, the gods of Sidon, the gods of Moab, the gods of the Ammonites, and the gods of the Philistines. And they forsook the Lord and did not serve him. We see that they don't just pick one or two, they pick them all. They go everywhere and decide to serve and worship all the gods of the nations around them. So the sin increases in Israel, that they become even more idolatrous than they've ever been before. And God gets angry with them again. And so what God decides to do is increase their suffering. Instead of one oppressive nation, now he's going to bring two oppressive nations against them, the Philistines from their west and the Ammonites from their east. And they're going to come in and squeeze and bring a lot of suffering and pain. And the story of Jephthah and the salvation that God's going to bring is mainly going to focus in on the Ammonites. But we see that God is increasing the judgment, increasing the pain, because they have increased the suffering. The people of Israel have this oppression upon them for 18 years, and then they finally wise up and they cry out to God, saying, we have sinned against you, we've forsaken our God. And this time, God actually says, no. He says, did I not save you from the Egyptians, the Amorites, from the Ammonites and the Philistines? The Sidonians also, and the Amalekites and the Moabites oppressed you. And you cried out to me, and I saved you out of their hands. Yet you have forsaken me and served other gods. Therefore I will save you no more. Go and cry out to the gods whom you have chosen. Let them save you in the time of your distress. God says no. We've been waiting for this. I mean, it's been happening, and we've been just like, oh, there's no way. God's not going to save them because he's been so patient and they don't learn their lesson. And we would have given up on them a long time ago, but God's been merciful. And we see that God's patience is really being tried by the Israelites as now they've picked up even more gods and become even more wicked than they've ever been before. And God is so frustrated with them that he says, no, I will save you no more. You trusted in those gods. Let those gods save you. And we're all like, yeah, get them, God. And yet, at the same time, we wouldn't want God to stop saving us. So we read this and we think, that's right. And our justice meter has been going off like something needs to happen. But at the same time, in reality, we mess up again and again and again. And we want God's patience to continually be for us. We notice that the people of Israel respond to this message that God's not going to save them anymore with a repentant heart. They say, we have sinned against the Lord. You do whatever seems good to you, but please deliver us this day. And they go and they put away all the foreign gods from among them, and they start serving the Lord only. God's told them no. And they still choose to repent and turn to God. And we read that God lets those Ammonites and those Philistines come in and oppress them and bring misery upon Israel, but he doesn't like it. And eventually God gets tired of seeing his people suffering. And it says he became impatient over the misery of Israel. Man. God tried to say no, but he just couldn't hold himself back forever. He could not allow them to continually suffer. He had to step in. He had to help because he is so merciful and compassionate. His heart is breaking as he was seeing the people trying to repent, trying to change in a bigger way than maybe they've ever done before, and seeing them suffer, he couldn't stand it. So we read about Jephthah. And Jephthah is interesting because Jephthah is a reject. Jephthah, we read, is a Gileadite. He was up in the northern half of Israel on the eastern side, and he was a descendant of Gilead and a prostitute. And because of that, the other sons of Gilead ran him out of town. They said, no, you're not gonna take part in the inheritance with us. We don't want you here. You get out of here. And so Jephthah, who is actually a mighty warrior, is rejected by his own people because he was the son of a prostitute. And they weren't having that. So Jephthah's out probably raving to survive, and worthless fellows join him, and he's rejected. But Gilead is oppressed by the Ammonites, and nobody will step up to fight against the Ammonites and lead the people. Nobody's a mighty warrior like Jephthah. So the leaders of Gilead send a message to Jephthah. They say, please come and save us. You're a son of Gilead. Please come and save us. And what's interesting as we read through the story is Jephthah doesn't say, oh, okay, great, I'll come help you. He says, didn't you reject me? Didn't you say I'm not one of you? And you want me to come back and help you? He doesn't immediately agree to lead the army. And so the elders, the leaders, come back and they say, no, this is why we've turned to you, because we know that you can go out and fight against these Ammonites and give us success, and you do that, and you will be the head of all of our people. So basically making him the governor or king of the Gileadites and the king of Israel. It seems like for some reason he's given that level of responsibility, that level of honor and glory and prestige, that he would be the judge, he would be the leader of all the people. Maybe not the king, they never use that terminology, but they do lift him up to be the head of all the people. So here's a reject who they've decided is a mighty warrior who can save them, and so they decide to lift him up and make him their leader. Jephthah decides not to just go out in battle, though, like all the other judges. Jephthah sends a letter to the Ammonite king and says, what do you got against us that you're coming and fighting against us? Like, why are you doing this? He doesn't even want to fight. He's this mighty, valiant warrior, but he doesn't want to fight. He's trying to ask them, what's your issue? Why have you come in here? And the Ammonites say, because you guys, whenever y'all came up from Egypt, y'all stole this land from us. It was the land of Sihon, the king of the Amorites. It was north of Ammon and north of Moab. It was not even close to connected to the Ammonite area. But the Ammonite king says, that's our land. And Jephthah responds, not according to our history. In fact, that makes no sense. We came all the way around Edom. We came all the way around Ammon and Moab. And then we wanted to pass through the land of Sihon to get to our land, but they wouldn't let us. So we defeated Sihon and we took over the land. So that's what actually happened. This is not your land. You didn't have land north of Moab and south of Moab. That's not how it's ever been. And that was 300 years ago that happened. And now you're just now coming to try to take claim of that land. That makes absolutely no sense. And he ends with something that is theologically flawed. He says, the God of Israel delivered all this to us, and your God, Chemosh, he delivered your land to you, so, you need to just leave us alone. No, Chemosh didn't deliver any land. The God of Israel told Israel to leave the Ammonites and Moabites alone because he had given the land of Ammon, the land of Moab to them, the land of Edom to them. So Chemosh isn't even a real God, but Joab speaks as though he is, telling us that it's not all right in the mentality and the history and the theology of Israel's leader, Joab. But a lot of it is, and it's interesting that he knows the history well enough to recite it to the Ammonite king. So here we see he's not just negotiating with the elders of Gilead, but he's also debating with the king of Ammon. So he's a talker. He talks, and he tries to talk his way out of things. But the Ammonite king is not going to have it. So Israel's going to go up and battle against the Ammonites, and Jephthah's not real excited about it, apparently. But the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him in verse 29, and that didn't happen to Abimelech, but that does happen to those who are judges, those who God is going to give strength to go out and to fight and win the battle. The Spirit of the Lord comes upon them, and they're filled with this might and able to defeat their enemies. Well, after the Spirit has been given to him, whenever he comes and he sees this great army of Ammon, he decides he wants to be sure that they're going to win. So he chooses to make a vow to God. He says, God, if you will give the Ammonites into my hand, then whatever comes out from the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the Ammonites will be the Lord's. And I'll offer it up as a burnt offering. Now, burnt offerings are just completely consumed, completely burned up. None of it gets to remain with the person. It's all going to God. And so this, as I said, is kind of a form of manipulation. God, if you'll do this for me, then I'll give this to you. And his words are interesting because he says, I will give to you as a burnt offering whatever comes out from the doors of my house. Now, typically burnt offerings, you're given goats or you're given oxen or you're given sheep or you're given some kind of animal. But coming out of the doors of the house, I mean, wait a second, what are you doing, Jephthah? Why are you promising that? Why are you vowing that? I mean, what's in your house that's going to come out that you would burn up to God? That doesn't make any sense. And we see that he pays for this vow. God gives him the Ammonites, as God was probably going to do anyway, right? God gave him, the Spirit of the Lord was upon him. And he said to the Ammonite king, the Lord's going to be the judge because you're wrong and I'm right, and you're trying to steal what's not yours. God's going to be the judge between us. So he said the right things. The Spirit of the Lord was upon him, and still he decided to make this vow to try to force God to give him victory over the Ammonites. And now we see he's going to pay for it. Jephthah comes home from the battle, and behold, his daughter came out to meet him with tambourines and with dances. It says she was his only child. Besides her, he had neither son nor daughter. Yeah, you just imagine the scene. Your dad's been gone for a long time, fighting a battle against a very difficult army, and you don't know if he's ever going to return again. And you maybe hear the dogs barking outside, or you hear some rustling, and then you go and look out the window. You see he's there. You get your tambourine, and you get ready, and you go out there, running out to meet your dad with dancing and rejoicing because God has given them victory. And then you realize that your father was very foolish. And he made a vow that he cannot take back, to offer you in burnt offering to the Lord. His foolish words are going to cost him. Now, as we read through the remainder of chapter 11, we'll notice that it talks about how she is weeping over her virginity. She never knows a man. She never has children. So basically, she will never have children again, and the lineage of Jephthah will be done. That's his only child, and maybe he can have more, but we don't read about him having any more. It seems as though she's it for him. And she's going for 2 months, and she's going to weep with her friends about her virginity. And then it says, Jephthah the Gileadite, he did according to his vow that he made. That's what it says. He did according to his vow that he made. Now, if we look back in the Old Testament, we see that there are times whenever Israelites are commanded to offer their firstborn child to the Lord, and then they could buy them back. There's means for not killing your children. We see killing your children in sacrifice to the Lord is an abomination to the Lord. It's not something that the Lord ever really desired for his people to be engaged in. In fact, he condemns that. He says the god of Molech, they offer their children to the god of Molech. You don't do that, Israel. So Jephthah making this promise, and then it says he kept the vow, is very difficult for us because we really hate the idea that he actually went through with killing his daughter and burning her in order to sacrifice her to God. We hate that idea. But as we look throughout the Judges, we see darkness. We see men and women who are worshiping false gods like Molech and offering sacrifices to them in all kinds of immoral and wicked ways. So even though we don't like to believe that he actually sacrificed his daughter as a burnt offering, and we see the virginity commentary in there, and we could be confused to say, well, maybe she was just given to the Lord and she was devoted to the Lord like Samuel will be later, and she'll always serve the Lord. And maybe some of you believe that's what happened, and I hope that's what happened. But the words, he did to her according to the vow that he had made, doesn't give me much hope. It seems as though he didn't just give her to the Lord, he offered her as a burnt offering to the Lord. And that's troubling, and that's scary if that's the case. But think about the fact that after he makes this vow, God doesn't say a word. What's really odd about this story and the Spirit of the Lord coming upon Jephthah, him making the vow, there's never any voice from God, a prophet from God saying, okay, God's going to do this for you. It's all going to work out. And God's going to be real happy with you after you go back and you fulfill your vow and you sacrifice your daughter. Silence. The silence of God is very notable in this story. That he does not ever say, I'm okay with that, or I'm happy with you for doing that. It seems as though God just decided to use Jephthah, who was a wicked man. It seems like what we learn in this text is Jephthah is not somebody we want to emulate. I mean, I don't want to be like him. I don't want to be the guy who is negotiating and debating and manipulating and really has that silver tongue that can convince people and try to get what I want about everything. It's like Jephthah had this mindset, this mentality that if he could just get whatever he wanted, then everything would be okay. But it's almost like his words that he was so good with are the very thing that led to his downfall. Have you ever done that? You ever said something, maybe tried to manipulate to get an outcome you desire, and really you've gone too far. You said too much. Maybe made a vow that you weren't really ready to fulfill, or that you didn't realize the cost of what it is that you were saying at the time, and now you're in it. You've made the vow. You've said that you'll do the thing, and now you feel as though you have to do the thing. Our words are very, very powerful, and they can trip us up, and they can cause serious pain and serious harm if we let them. Notice how in our prayers we could do that. We could talk to God in such a way that we ask God for something and we think we have to have that thing, and we might, like Jephthah, say, "I'll go and fight this battle if you will do this for me," or I'll go and I'll offer whatever comes out my door as a burnt offering if you will do this for me. Notice how that whole mindset is placing conditions on obedience to God. Like, it's not that he's offering sacrifices out of a grateful heart because he believes God's going to do all these wonderful things for him, and he just loves God so much for all the things he's already done for him. It's this transactional relationship that Jephthah has with God, or that he wants to have with God. Have you ever had that kind of mindset, that thought process that God's the one who gives me things and I do things to make him happy, and we have that kind of consumer and merchant relationship? He gives me what I want, I give him what he wants. We've got that kind of relationship going on. You see how that's kind of the mentality here. It's this God owes me attitude. Because of this great sacrifice, God owes me. You see, that's not ideal. That's not a good relationship. And that's not the relationship that we see being the most beneficial relationship in Scriptures. It seems like Jephthah has that relationship, and it costs him greatly. He'll even go on to suffer even more. We find Jephthah in conflict with the Ephraimites because he can't convince them to do the right things, and he can't overcome his own arrogance. He goes and he kills like 42,000 of the Israelites who come up against him, the Ephraimites. He's not a good guy. And he makes all kinds of bad decisions. We see in this that foolish words have consequences. So we need to be careful what we say. We need to be careful what we vow. We don't need to be flippant about the things that come out of our mouths. We need to be aware of who God is and the fact that he doesn't owe us anything for our obedience. He's already given us everything that we could ever desire, and we should just be grateful to him for what he's given us. I want to just compare this story to another man who was actually told by God to offer his son as a sacrifice. You know what I'm talking about? Abraham. Think about Abraham for a second. Make a little compare and contrast of these two men. You have Abraham who listened to God tell him, "Go and offer your son as a sacrifice." And he doesn't negotiate with God, and he doesn't try to debate with God or manipulate God or try to get the outcome that he really wants. Instead, he chooses to trust in God and submit to God. "God, if that's what you want me to do, Isaac, let's go get some wood. We're going to go up to this mountain and offer a sacrifice to God." And he does that very morning. And whenever Isaac asks, "Well, Father, here's the wood and here's the place for the sacrifice, but where's the sacrifice?" Abraham just tells him, "God will provide." Abraham is just believing that God's going to make this turn out okay, even though God hasn't revealed to him how. He thinks God's going to resurrect him. He even is raising the knife up to cut his son's throat and to kill him, to offer him as a burnt offering. And God says, wait, stop, Abraham. Now I know that you truly trust me, that you truly have faith in me. And guess what? There's a ram to offer as a burnt offering and sacrifice to God. I find that fascinating, just thinking about Abraham and how God spoke and God told him to do it. And then God spoke and said, wait, don't do it. Because it was God, or it was originated from God. God also was the one who said, no, you're not going to do this. This is not okay. But with Jephthah, it originated from Jephthah. And God doesn't approve. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't even stop what happens. So I think that picture comparison helps us to see Jephthah's not right. He's not a guy for us to emulate. Now, he's mentioned in Hebrews 11 as a man of faith. He obviously has faith in God. He goes out and fights this battle, and he defeats the Ammonites and leads the people out of their oppression and their suffering, and he's called a man of faith. But he's also a fool and not somebody we should emulate. We're going to learn about Solomon. Not Solomon. We're going to learn about Samson. No, you don't want to emulate him either, okay? These are some of the last judges, and they do some pretty wild and wicked things. So, and then there's one more person for us to think about who also sacrificed his son. And that was God. You know, you got the picture of Jephthah sacrificing his daughter. You got the picture of Abraham sacrificing his son. And then you have the picture of God sacrificing his son. And in that case, we have Jesus saying, I will be sacrificed for these people. Jesus willingly giving himself. And notice the parallel. Jephthah's daughter does not debate with Jephthah. She doesn't argue with him. She says, can I at least go and mourn my virginity for 2 months? But she submits to her father. In a way, she's kind of typological. She's kind of like Jesus. Instead of trying to negotiate or debate or manipulate, she trusts him. And this is very much what we see Jesus doing. And Jesus doesn't say to God in the Garden of Gethsemane, if you'll remove this cup from me, then I'll serve you. He says, whether you do it or not, I will serve you. And that mentality is not the mentality of Jephthah, but it is the mentality that we need to have in our lives. That whatever God wants to do, whatever the outcome, I'm not trying to manipulate to make the outcome what I think it should be, but whatever God wants the outcome to be is okay because I trust him to provide. I trust him to provide. In our lives, we're going to have all kinds of crisis situations and things that are going to happen, and we're going to call out to God and try to manipulate him and want him to do things that are going to be the most beneficial outcome for us. We're just going to do it because we're weak. But I hope that we can wrap our minds around the fact that whether he does it or not, his will is more important than mine. The outcome that he has in mind is better than my own outcome. And I would do better not to vow something that I can't take back and that might be more than I can really give. Jesus himself said in Matthew 5:33-37, again, you've heard it said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil. Jesus himself is trying to convince us not to try to manipulate God and say all these vows to get God to do what we want to do, but to just obey, to just do the things that we're supposed to do and trust God to help us along the way and reach out to him and ask him for help, but trust in his will just as Jesus did. I hope that this helps you as you think about your relationship with God, not to make vows rashly, not to try to manipulate or force an outcome, to just trust God, to let it be the way that it's going to be. This is what Jesus desires for us to do. And this is what we see is a wonderful example for us. So if you're here tonight and you're struggling with anything, we want you to know that we care about you. We want you to know that we're here to help. If you have any needs whatsoever, please come as we stand and as we sing.